Hey everybody, Rock DIY here. I am here with my Ryobi chainsaw, and this is an RY3818. This is an 18-inch chainsaw, and this has been my trusty chainsaw. It's been through a lot. You can see some of the videos I've done on it, and I got it. A lot of people don't think Ryobi is that great, but this Ryobi chainsaw worked out pretty good for me. And then I did the Alaskan chainsaw mill video, and then I was going to do some additional videos showing the work that you can do with the Alaskan chainsaw mill. And unfortunately, the trigger broke off. And I have a video prepped to cover this, but real quick, this trigger right here broke, and I couldn't fix it because the piece was so small that I couldn't get it to work. So I attempted to order it, but I ordered these caps, and then I ordered a cover, and then some other stuff, and then I found out after a while, I actually forgot about the parts I ordered, and then like 4 months went by or 3 months went by. I inquired about it, and they said, well, you told us not to ship it until we had everything, and we don't have the trigger. And the trigger is not expected to be in anytime soon. So then I was like, okay, can you ship the other stuff and then let me know when the trigger comes in? And they said, no, we can't inform you of that. You're gonna have to keep calling in. Call us and ask us if it's in. And unfortunately, that's what I did before. They said, okay, order it and then you'll get it. So it's like a double-edged sword here. It's actually been in about 1.5 years. And kind of a long story short, I ended up finally getting the trigger, but I was told by the company that represents Ryobi, the one lady, Barbara, I will use her name, what she told me when I couldn't get the trigger, and there was a possibility that the trigger would never come in. She told me that I needed to buy a new chainsaw, which I told her I was not going to do when this part is like $1.64. But I ended up getting it, so it's on there. I've actually been using this chainsaw, and just like it's always been, even after 1.5 years of no use. Put some fuel in it, put some chain oil, and put the choke on, pulled it a couple times, started right up, good as new. Unfortunately, one of the things I did without even realizing at some point is that I got rid of my bar that already had the holes in it for the Alaskan chainsaw mill. So now what I've got to do, the good thing is I still have this, and I've got the blocks. Unfortunately, the bar is not prepped to do this. So I've got to put this on, prep it, put some blocks on it, and I've got some small black walnut slabs that I want to cut for some live edge pieces. And then I had a neighbor request some what some people call cookies. I don't call them cookies, but they're commonly called slices, and they're just basically a log that's been cut into slices, and then they use them as wood centerpieces, and they can be stained, they can be burned, they can be sealed, left natural, no bark, any number of things. This person wants some slices, so I want to make the slices uniform as far as size. This is going to be the best way to do it. I could use this bar right here, but this is my newest one, and I don't want to put a hole in it. I could, and it'll still function, but I'd rather just do it in a bar that I've actually already have and have had for a while. So what I have to do is get the other hole put on it. So what I'll do is take this bolt and wing nut off, and then also take the washers off. So this bolt is somewhat threaded to the wood, so it's not coming out right away. So I have to unscrew it and pull it at the same time. I'm going to take the wing nut off the opposite end. The longer end of this board goes towards the end. The short end goes on this side, and you know that this is on this side, and because in my original video I was going to put it up against the chainsaw, but the muffler exhaust is right here and it gets really hot, and I didn't want the wood to burn, so I offset it to prevent that. Now what I'm going to do is take this bar, slide it on there. I have to make sure I center it on this board as it is on this end. Now I'm going to put a clamp on it to hold it in place. These little tiny clamps don't work that great. Alright, so I've got it clamped where I need it. And now, I almost put the clamp right over the hole. Now what I'm going to do is start the drill hole, and now I'll take the clamp off and finish drilling the hole. I don't want to completely drill it through the wood, so I'll just get it started and then I'll pull it apart to finish it. This is a 15/64 bit. Like I said, I'm not going to do this to finish it all the way through. I'm just going to do this to get it started, and then I'll pull it off. I really just need it marked, but I don't have an actual marker, pencil, or pen that I can put through there to mark it. That's why I am using the drill. And so right there is where the center point is for where I need to drill it. Put this block here, I'll drill into my table. For reference, this is what I'm going to be cutting. This one was just a natural cut with a chainsaw, so it's not uniform as far as thickness. It's thicker over here than it is over here, but that's the idea, is to make slices like this with the Alaskan chainsaw mill. And as I was talking about earlier, I had to take the old bar off, put the new bar on, drill a new hole, and then what I did is I put these 1-inch spacers. I've got 1 inch, 1.5, and 2 inch. And then one of the things that I have to do in order to prevent the chain from going into this wood or just making the chainsaw not work is I've got to have these little grooves put in here to prevent the chain from rubbing on the wood. And then this part would go up against the bar, and the chain would run freely without hitting the wood. And this is 1.5. These are the 1 inch. And the amount of space between the two is 10 7/8 on center, so I can get these slices up to about 10 7/8. This one is pretty close. Then the next thing is, so I've got a log, and before I actually start cutting the log, I need to make sure that the very first cut is nice and flat. If it's not flat, and I go to use the Alaskan chainsaw mill, every piece is going to look like that piece. And sometimes you have to cut the first one, then use the Alaskan chainsaw mill, and then the one that you get after that is where you will have pieces that are all alike. So you might have some sacrificial pieces that you cut first. And one other thing, the reason why I'm doing this is because for some reason it doesn't make sense to me But people purchase these and they use them for centerpieces for weddings or parties or whatever. And people have found where if they cut these and make them, that they can sell them in packs of 4 for $80, or they can sell a 1 foot long log that's 10 inches in diameter for $350 as if it's a fine piece of furniture. I'm not trying to do that. I'm just trying to help somebody out. Something to point out that I pointed out before, and unfortunately I didn't do it yet, but I do need to do it. It is a good idea to put your wing nuts on the wood side, because if you happen to be cutting and you see one of these wing nuts starting to come off, you may want to reach for these and could cause an injury. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the wing nut on the opposite side in order to prevent that from happening, because you're less likely to reach for this side when it's just a bolt head. And if you notice that the wing nut starts to spin on its own while you're working, you can just reach on this side and you are less likely to cause injury to yourself. Got it reversed just to be on the safe side. Wing nuts over here, and then again, to discuss how you should be doing this, is you can use this edge or you can use the bottom edge, but the board needs to be on top of the piece that you're going to cut. So if you just cut a flat piece, this board needs to sit up on top of it. And so for instance, if this was a full-size log, let's just say this was like a foot long log, and this is the upper portion of the Alaskan chainsaw mill, needs to be just like this, oriented like this. So this board is up on top of this wood piece, and the key is making sure that your fuel cap and your oil cap are facing up, because you're going to have chainsaw issues if it's facing the opposite direction. So then as you start to cut, you're going to move it across the piece of wood in this direction, because the chain is going to be cutting underneath all the way across until that piece comes off. The other option is to leave your chainsaw like this and use the wood as a guide again, except this actually works a little bit better as far as using the bottom edge of your chainsaw chain, and also being able to see to the inside here to tell whether board is flush with the piece that you're cutting. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this log, it's about 2 feet long, about 10 inches in diameter, and I'm going to lock it in place on this board. And I'm just trying to keep this as simple as possible. I'm going to lock it down on the board so it can't move. And then what I'm going to do is set up some boards so that I can put a router sled on it so I can get a part of this nice and flat. Once that's flat, then what I'll do is transition to actually using the Alaskan chainsaw mill. This is the process that I've used before. Big thing initially is making sure I have space around the log. I'm going to put this in the center. And when I say lock the log down, you really need to lock it down, because the last thing you want it to do is move while you're trying to route it or use the Alaskan chainsaw mill. I'm going to put some screws into these boards, and then I'll put some end blocks just to keep it from shifting. And how you do this does not need to be pretty. You just need to get it to be locked down. I don't have any screws going into the log. I just got them going into these 2x2s that are on the sides, and then I'll put 2 end pieces. That log is locked down. Now what I've got to do is build a frame that allows me to put the sled on and run it back and forth without having any obstructions. I didn't have to do too much work to build these stands for my router sled because I had them from a project I just finished. So I was able to just stack these, screw them every board until I got it up here, and then same here, and then your width doesn't really matter too much. And the good thing, or what you want, is the ability to slide your sled without your sled falling, or your log rolling or moving, or your support boards moving. You might need to put another screw in that one, but the router will go on here, and then basically I can slide this where I need to. I can move forward, backwards, like pretty much move wherever I need to move. And I'll mount the router onto this plate that I use for my router, so that it stays on the router sled. And what I'll do is I'll go down as much as possible. At some point I may need to lower these if I want to bring it down more, because my router is only going to have so much reach. And you don't want it where all you got flat is right here. You could, but when you use the Alaskan chainsaw mill, it may make the board a little wobbly having such a narrow flat spot. So it's better to get a larger flat spot on your log before you start using the Alaskan chainsaw mill. Before I got ready to start, went to go grab my router, only to realize that it's been a long time since I've used the router sled, that I actually forgot that I don't have the router anymore that I used for this. So this was the plate for the original router, which was a Makita, but I ended up buying this smaller one, and basically had to make another plate for this router to be used on here. It's nice when it just sits right in there and you can do what you got to do. I'll hold on to this one just in case I need it for something. Right now I've got the router bottomed out, so the sleeve here is all the way to the top, and the router bit is as far down as it will go for now. Let me see right here. And I'm going to go with this for now. And then if I need to, what I'll end up having to do is remove a 2x4 to bring it down some. Because like I said, I can't bring this down any further than it already is. And go from there. So here we go. You can see how the cut came out, and you can tell this side was actually lower, so there's still some bark left here. And then as it went this way, the core of the log was higher. And this is still relatively wet wood, so because it's wet, you're going to get this stringy effect from the router bit. It almost looks like it went deeper in some spots, but that's not actually what happened. It actually was ripping the wet wood out of the stump. So that's not perfectly flat, but it'll work. You can see there that it was a little rough getting started, and but unfortunately I think what happened is on a previous cut, when I was cutting it against the grain versus with the grain, the chainsaw kind of went at an angle, and so as it was cutting, it was kind of pinching the chain, and then the chain wasn't really cutting. So when I did it this way with the grain, it was a little harder to get it started. I mean, it eventually started working, but one of the things you got to be aware of is that when you do this, the chain can get kind of pinched, and so sometimes you got to wiggle it around a little bit. I know you're looking for a flat piece of live edge, but unfortunately sometimes you got to move it around a little bit to get what you want. This one was cut across here, so when I started cutting it, this piece came off first, but you can see it's not too bad. It's pretty flat, and I'm just doing this for demonstration purposes. So I'm gonna finish by cutting this piece and then maybe do another one. It would be a good idea before starting to do this is either have a newly sharpened chain or have a new chain, because it'll go a whole lot faster and it won't require as much work on your part. And then every time you get ready to start cutting, make sure your wing nuts are tight so that they don't bounce off while you're cutting. There are numerous ways that you can get the initial portion of your log flat. Like I did, I used the router first. If you have a big enough planer, you could just run it through a planer. Maybe a little difficult, but you could. You could just take a chainsaw and run it down. But unfortunately, the real important part about if you want flat live edge boards is your initial cut has to be pretty flat. If it's waffled, bumps, rough, however you cut it, your next board's going to be the same. Then the next board's going to be the same as that one. So you do want to get it right. So as you saw, cut this piece off, and you could see that what I was doing was rocking back and forth, this like this, in order to cut it. Normally I wouldn't have to do that, but I think I'm having to do that because the chain got worn a certain way, so it doesn't. Normally I would be able to just keep going without any issues, but I'm having to rock it back and forth to cut. So there you go. There's another small live edge. Not trying to be all impressive with how big my live edge pieces are. Now, you know, there is a cut right here, so I can't do anything about that, but I can continue to cut. And I've shown it previously, I'm using 1-inch blocks right here. So if I wanted thicker pieces, I could put my 1.5 or my 2 in there, and then I can combine 1 with 1.5 or 1.5 with 2 to make my live edges thicker. But in this case, I wanted 1-inch slabs just to show how it works. And there you go. I'm going to cut some more pieces, but cutting this into live edge slabs when it's still wet, it'll probably waffle quite a bit and crack. If it had already been seasoned, it would not be as bad. But there you go. There's using the Alaskan chainsaw mill with just a regular everyday chainsaw you can buy at the big box store. Do some modifications, buy some bolts, buy some 2x4s and some washers and wing nuts, and you can do the same thing. And this is just a way. It's not the only way, but it is a way. that there was a top of the chain cut. It went much faster than the bottom of the chain. Then this is black walnut that's been seasoning for about a year. So it's a little bit drier than the poplar that I cut. Although it still feels like it's pretty wet inside. Yeah, it's pretty wet inside. But this is not a significant live edge cut. But this is something you can make something out of. Maybe make a short coat rack or a keychain or key holder or any number of things. This went pretty fast using the top of the chain. I did route the top. I had to freehand some of the bark that was on the top because it was a little bit higher than what was needed, but I was able to knock it off and get the router sled to go across. It went deep here only because the router bit worked its way out of the collar. So luckily I caught that before it spun off or caused an injury, but it did go off right there. But it's not a bad live edge piece.